Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third Climate Smart Agriculture webinar. My name is Valdete Berisha, and I'm part of the Agriculture Global Practice here at the World Bank. I'm happy you could join us today for this webinar, which is a part of a series of webinars on climate smart agriculture organized by the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. For those of you who are joining for the first time, the objective of the Climate Smart Agriculture webinar series is to highlight the results of 6 country case studies assessing the state of climate smart agriculture implementation. Through these webinars, the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture provides an open forum to discuss the extent to which existing national strategies and programs promote climate smart agricultural practices in different countries. In addition, the webinar examines some of the challenges that the countries are facing in the implementation of climate smart agricultural practices. As you may be aware, last week's webinar highlighted the country case study of Vietnam. We heard about Vietnam's experience with CSA implementation and certain specific policies and practices currently in place in Vietnam. Today, we will hear from our CSA implementation speakers in Costa Rica. We have 2 more weeks left, during which we will feature 3 more case studies with France, Malawi, and Tanzania. So we really hope that you will be able to join us on those upcoming webinars as well. The registration, I will post the registration link later on the chat box, where you can click on it and then register for each of the upcoming events. Today, I'm happy to welcome our 3 speakers. Kelly Witkowski, who is the Agriculture and Climate Change Specialist with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. Kelly works to develop capacity and facilitate processes to integrate climate change adaptation into planning and action in the agricultural sector in Latin America and the Caribbean. Our second speaker is Roberto Azofeifa, who is the Chief of Sustainable Production Department at the National Directorate of Agricultural Extension with the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock in Costa Rica. Roberto has an extensive experience on sustainable development and has been part of a number of initiatives on sustainable production in Costa Rica over the last 25 years. And our third speaker is Bastiaan Louman, who is a forest landscape management and climate change specialist with CATIE, which is a tropical agricultural research and higher education center that works to reduce rural poverty, combining science, education, and innovation in Latin America and the Caribbean. Our speakers today will share via presentation the findings from a case study on climate smart agricultural implementation in Costa Rica. Kelly will kick off the presentation, and this will be followed by Roberto and Bastiaan. We will hear from all 3 speakers for about 30 minutes. In addition, I will take questions and answers. Questions throughout the session, and ask the speakers to respond at the end of their presentation. So please, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat box at any time during the presentation, and I will take note and read it to the speakers at the end. And if you've attended previous webinars, you'll be aware that we will not be able to allow microphone use among participants in order to preserve sound quality. We usually do get large numbers of attendees during these webinars, and it's difficult to manage the sound if we allowed microphones for everyone. So we find that it's best practice if we ask participants to type in their questions, and then we will read them out to the speakers at the end. So if you currently don't see the chat box that you can use to type in your question, please look for it on the right side of your screen. At the top, there should be a tab there that says chat. So if you click on that, and the chat box will be enabled. Make sure that when you type in your question, you select from the drop-down menu all participants, because that way we can ensure that everyone is able to see the question, including me as a host and the speakers themselves as well. At the end, we will also conduct a very brief survey to find out what you thought about today's webinar. So I really do encourage you to complete the survey and provide us feedback, as it helps us understand better the value of these presentations for our audience. And also, as you may have seen, the webinars, all webinars are usually recorded and posted on the GACSA website. So you'll be able to download the presentation and the webinar recording from the website. We will provide you, my colleagues at the FAO will provide you with a link to the website where you can download these materials fairly soon after the event. Not right away, but because it takes a little bit of time to process these and upload them, but in the next few days. We will end the webinar on time, and as soon as we hope that within this time we will be able to answer all of the questions. But if not, you're also welcome to contact us if you have any remaining questions or you would like to get in touch with the speakers. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you'll enjoy the presentation. And I'll pass it over to Leah to Kelly to start her presentation, and then we'll go on from there with Roberto and Bastiaan.
Great. Thank you, Valette. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. We're going to tell you a little bit about the context of climate-smart agriculture in Costa Rica. There's quite a lot of information to cover, so we'll do our best. I'm going to start out by giving you a little bit of context at the regional level regarding the enabling environment that supports climate-smart agriculture action and policy at the national level in Costa Rica, followed by Roberto, who will discuss the different policies, practices, and strategies being employed in Costa Rica, and Bastiaan will finish up talking about the challenges and next steps moving forward. There we go. Okay, first a little bit of context for those of you that are not familiar with the region, but Central America is a very vulnerable region, with agricultural and rural areas being particularly exposed and sensitive to the very frequent hydrometeorological events in the region. Central America has quite a unique and strong regional integration and articulation structure called the Central American Integration System. And this, I think, is quite unique compared to other regions. And it's called IICA for short, which was established in 1993 and really serves to unite the region both economically and politically. That includes the 7 countries of Central America, as well as the Dominican Republic and several other countries as official regional observers. The integration system is comprised of the president of each nation, and they usually meet twice a year. And then below that are different sectoral bodies related to health, tourism, economics, etc. And one of them that deals with the environmental issues is called the CCAD, or the Central American Commission on Environment and Development, which is made up of representatives or the ministers of environment themselves. And then there's also a Central American Agricultural Council, which is comprised of the ministers of agriculture. It has quite an active secretariat, which is located at IICA's headquarters in Costa Rica. And so these obviously provide a lot of strategic guidelines and promote regional initiatives on these topics in Central America. And under the framework of the CAC, or the Central American Agricultural Council, there's different technical bodies and established work plans that advance regional priorities and initiatives. And one of these is a technical group on climate change and integrated risk management, which I'll tell you about in another minute. Climate change in Central America has long been acknowledged as a significant challenge for the region. When the Central American Integration System was relaunched in 2010 and strengthened, climate change and risk management was actually established as one of the 5 pillars. So it's quite integrated and present there. There's also lots of different policies and strategies that guide the CAC and the region and lay the political groundwork and enabling environment for climate-smart agriculture in these countries. The Central American Agricultural Policy obviously mentions climate change. There's also this regional agro-environmental and health strategy that was established in 2008, and it sprung out of a recognition of the interrelationship between the different strategic lines of action, and then serves as a reference point for the other public policy instruments that you see here. It has 5 pillars, all dealing with environment and health, biodiversity, sustainable land management, climate change and climate variability, and a couple others. And this is also helps to bring down the international conventions on desertification, biodiversity, and climate change, and help them kind of land and articulate in the region. There's also the Rural Territorial Development Strategy, which is being implemented quite effectively in the region. It's called ECADIRT, and it's a multi-sectoral territorial approach that works to integrate actions at the local, regional, and national levels, and one of its 5 major components is nature and territories, under which climate change is obviously covered. So, as I mentioned, the Technical Group on Climate Change and Integrated Risk Management is one of the technical working bodies under the CAC, and it was established in 2012 and made up of a representative of the Ministry of Agriculture, usually the climate change focal point, and an alternative from each country. And this group seeks to use an integrated approach and really enhance synergies and alignment between the topics of climate change and risk management in the region. This obviously includes climate-smart agriculture. They work to raise awareness and strengthen capacity on different CSA options. They are working to increase the availability of agroclimatic information for the region. They work together to seek financial and technical support and to strengthen the different institutions in the region to better enable climate-smart agriculture to be effective. And they also coordinate and articulate with other sectors and actors quite efficiently. This year, the group has a project with CATIE on manure management to reduce emissions. They've also had several learning events on gender, agriculture, and climate change, and also have a strong line of work to improve the participation of the agricultural sector in the international climate negotiations. They're supported by an interagency working group made up of these institutions that you can see here, and this really works to ensure that the support and efforts provided in the region are coordinated and collaborative and build on each other. In August of last year, there was a regional declaration on climate-smart agriculture that you can read here that really provided or demonstrated the political will for addressing this topic in the region. There was also a regional alert regarding El Niño, which affected the region quite significantly this past year, and under that there was a directive to help develop or to promote the development of a regional action plan that considers climate-smart agriculture in the region. There's also been many other mandates and agreements that support climate-smart agriculture over the past 5 years, looking at how to integrate food and nutrition security and gender in the management of risks relating to climate change in the sector. And let's see, so you can see, I think, that there's regional sectoral policies, there's regional intersectoral policies that then feed into national sectoral agricultural policies. And these regional bodies that exist in the region, the technical working group, that serves to coordinate and work between these actors is really important. I also wanted to just mention that at the international level, Costa Rica has had a very active participation in the different international initiatives that help them to support their national level climate-smart agriculture goals. They've for a long time now been an active participant in the international negotiations, sending a representative from the agricultural sector, sending submissions, holding side events, etc. They're one of the first country members of GACSA, and they work to do this case study through that. They're also members of the Global Research Alliance, and have some projects through that on greenhouse gas quantification methodologies. They also participate in the Bond Challenge and the 20 by 20 initiative, which are both focused on restoring land. And all of these then, serve to inform Costa Rica's INDC, or independently determined national contribution, which, the agricultural sector is the second highest emitter in the country, and the country placed the goal of being carbon neutral by 2021. And the agricultural sector obviously will be a very significant part of that. And I think Roberto will talk about that a little bit more. So to finish up, key messages: that the regional framework enables articulation between different levels, the efficient use of resources. It foments technical and political interactions and South-South cooperation, and it also allows for the longer-term sustainability and stability for climate-smart agriculture in the region. At the national level, turnover in the agricultural ministries tends to be quite high, and so these regional efforts and groups help to maintain stability over time. Also, it's important that Costa Rica has demonstrated leadership and really proactively involved itself early on in the international and regional initiatives to address climate change in the agricultural sector. And I think this demonstrates that leadership in the country has recognized the strategic opportunity to achieve enhanced competitiveness, efficiency, and resilience for their agricultural sector. So with that, I'll turn it over to Roberto.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. Costa Rica is a small country in Central America. 53% of the land is covered by protected areas. About 50% of the population live in the Central Valley. 2.4 million hectares are used in agriculture and livestock production in 93,000 farms with 26 hectares as average. In general, forest and agricultural activities coexist in each farm. 1/3 part of each farm is forest. The main land use systems are livestock, coffee, oil palm, sugar cane, pineapple, and banana. The agricultural sector is very important for the sustainable development of the country. It contributes with almost 13% of the GDP, provides employment for more than 12% of the economically active population, and ecosystem services, including food security for the population. Costa Rica is a hillside country. A central chain of mountains has an important influence. Costa Rica is a hillside country. A central chain of mountains has an important influence in terms of climate conditions. The east part of the territory is affected by floods, and the west part by droughts. Same as the other countries in Central America, Costa Rica is highly vulnerable to climate change. The increasing in frequency and intensity of hurricanes, the sensitivity of ecosystems and biodiversity, and the dependence of the economy on climate-sensitive activities such as agriculture and tourism are some of the relevant circumstances which highlight the need for action to addressing climate change and its consequences and promote adaptation measures to develop more resilient agri-food systems and communities. According to the National Inventory of Greenhouse Gas Emissions 2005, the agricultural sector is the second in terms of emissions. Within the agricultural sector, the main source of emissions is the livestock subsector, and the second is coffee. But fortunately for the sea-neutral goal in the agricultural sector, the potential for CO2 capture in soil and agroforestry systems is very relevant. This figure shows the core concept on climate-smart agriculture applied in Costa Rica. For more than 2 decades, the Costa Rican agricultural sector has been implementing initiatives aimed at aligning conservation and production objectives. At the beginning of the 19th, projects based on technical principles were established to boost production system productivity, spread vegetation cover, protect the soil, and improve soil conditions to foster the water and carbon cycles. Within the framework of projects intended to advance agroforestry systems, promote soil and water management and conservation, and build the capacity of small and medium producers. Institutions such as the Ministry of Environment and Energy, the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, and the Institute for Agricultural Development reported positive results with respect to productivity, agroecologically based production system, food and nutritional security, vegetation cover expansion, degraded land recovery, and others. These experiences laid the ground to pass laws and regulations for the sustainable management of the country's natural resources. In the first decade of the 21st century, Costa Rica experienced an important change through innovative proposals such as the Environmental Agenda under the responsibility of the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Environment, and CATIE, which generated the enabled conditions that prompt the development of productive initiatives for production and conservation principles. An important milestone in the field of climate-smart agriculture is the development program on sustainable agricultural production, which has the goal of increasing the income and improving the quality of life of the families of small and medium producers by fostering agricultural production system competitiveness in an environmentally and socially sustainable manner. This program established the recognition of environmental benefits for environmentally positive investment as an incentive to promote technological changes to reduce negative externalities, improve productive process efficiencies, and strengthen their adaptation to the climate change. So far, important economic, environmental, and social results have been achieved mainly in sectors such as coffee, livestock, and vegetables. During this decade, efforts both in the public and private sector have been geared toward the development of low emissions and resilience to the climate change. The proposals incorporate prior experiences and results and add a new element, carbon balance, in production systems. The agricultural sector will face big challenges under conditions where information and knowledge of variables such as the climate will determine its short, medium, and long-term success and stability. Public and public-private coordination have been fundamental to the progress achieved. According to the 2015-2018 policy for the agricultural sector and development of rural territories, the main challenge for national agriculture is to increase yields with higher value added and more favorable commercialization margins in most of the agri-food chains by improving the efficiency of natural resource consumption. Due to the importance of the agricultural sector in the rural development of the country, the relevant public institutions have a very important role to achieve the national development objectives on poverty and social inequity alleviation and enable conditions for economic growth and better jobs. In this context, climate-smart agriculture is part of the strategic actions for the policies on agriculture adaptation and mitigation to climate change and food and nutritional security and sovereignty. The incorporation of the climate variable to the management of institutional services is a fundamental part of the response required for the Costa Rican agricultural sector to become more resilient, to continue being competitive and sustainable, and to strengthen its participation in the national economy. Costa Rica has enabled environment for climate-smart agriculture due to diversity mechanisms and tools with respect to the regulations, knowledge, and information from the Public Extension and Research Institute market mechanisms to incentivize sustainable food system, and also economic incentive for ecosystem services for organic agriculture and environmentally positive investment. One of the important pillars in terms of technology change fostering the public extension is the public extension program, which is comprised by 490 persons who are in charge of the technical support to the farmers' organizations countrywide. Through the Environmental Services Recognition Program, an innovative program promoting technological changes through environmentally positive investment, improving the productivity and reducing negative externalities in the production process, it has been an important advancing process in terms of efficiency in water use and dry residues for energy in coffee mills, improvement of pastures in cattle, greenhouse gas emissions reduction in coffee and livestock sector. Coffee cooperatives and private enterprises, livestock farmers associations have advanced significant steps toward green development. Under the concept of sustainable production, Costa Rican agricultural sector has experimented important results. Also based on the lessons learned, the government and private sector have established enabling conditions to facilitate development in the agricultural sector and at the same time to protect the natural resources for the future generations. The priorities of greenhouse gas emissions mitigation and in the country are coffee and livestock sector. More recently, organic agricultural residues have been considered as opportunities to improve the performance of agricultural sector and resources to diversify the energy matrix. In next slides, I will refer to every case. Coffee production is very sensitive to climate change because climate conditions impact over several production factors in the biological cycle of the plant. Coffee sector has a high importance in terms of rural economy as well as soil and water conservation. It covers about 20% of land available for agricultural production, a considerable portion is in hillsides. The coffee sector has experimented interesting changes in the last 10 years with regard to quality and marketing issues. The number of exporters increased in comparison with 2002, the number of farmers decreased, and the number of coffee mills was duplicated. The big effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in coffee sector are the management of soil fertility and the treatment of humid residues produced in coffee plant processing. The technologies proposed by the NAMA must improve the yield and reduce cost of production. Otherwise, the coffee growers will continue using the traditional techniques. On the other hand, climate change is affecting negatively the production due to diseases and also risks on quality. The long-term perspective of coffee NAMA expects results in greenhouse gas emission reduction, carbon sequestration, and competitiveness. The coffee NAMA actions include mitigation and adaptation practices like the use of low-release fertilizer, agroforestry, soil conservation, organic residue recycling, and others. More than 70% of coffee grower families will be positively impacted by the technologies promoted by the NAMA. In terms of the use of the land for agricultural production, livestock is the most significant activity. In 40% of farms, there is livestock, and in 28% livestock is the main activity. In terms of total greenhouse gas emissions, livestock is the second place. The interesting point I would like to remark here is the potential for capturing CO2 due to 1/3 part of the land in livestock farm is forest, and if live fences and trees in grassland are included, the potential increases. The Livestock NAMA is the program through which it aims to achieve significant impacts on the livestock sector with the participation of private sector, Ministry of Agriculture, Environment, and finance institutions. In 15 years, the NAMA program would have impacted 60% of the land in livestock production system, 70% of the total hair, and reduced 6 million tons of CO2. This will be possible through actions in nutritional optimization, pasturing management, agroforestry, genetic improvement, among other climate-smart actions. The Livestock NAMA is a strategic program in terms of the greenhouse gas emission reduction and carbon sequestration, not only through the forest component in the livestock system, but also due to the carbon in soil in farms with pasture improvement. Organic residues are an important part of the production function among May 2013 and April 2014, with the generous financial support from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Japanese government and the technical assistance of the International Environmental Technology Center, is what developed in Costa Rica the project Waste Agricultural Biomass for Energy, Resource Conservation and Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction. The project included 12 agricultural activities, 7 in agriculture, 4 in livestock, and 1 in forestry. In total, 21 kinds of organic residues were estimated, both wet and dry waste basis. The most relevant activities in terms of waste agricultural biomass are pineapple, sugarcane, and livestock. The most promising technology is biodigestion to produce electricity. The project produced important outcomes which are basis for a new NAMA proposal for the use of waste agricultural biomass to improve productivity, energy efficiency, and to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in the most important agricultural sector activities in terms of biomass residues production. The adaptation process in the agricultural sector is understood as the capability of the farmers to be resilient in the climate change scenario. The priority adaptations actions in progress are diversification of activities at farm level for family nutrition and market, rain harvest and efficiency in water use by drip irrigation and other efficient systems, forage banks and rotational pasturing, organic residues recycling, good agricultural practices in soil and water management, plasticulture. The approach is to develop production system intensive in knowledge and low in external inputs. Climate change is stimulating development of new tools to support the technical decision-making process. One interesting example is the initiative Clima del Café. It is a system in the coffee sector launched recently by Instituto del Café de Costa Rica. The system captures the climate data in terms of wind, temperature, humidity, and rain in 29 meteorological stations located in strategic places in coffee farms and sends the data to a central computer which processes the data. One of its issues is to provide climate historic information per every coffee production region and generates graphs for each of the climate variables by region and even comparative graphs for these variables for the year since the meteorological station was installed. In the early coming future, the system also will generate risk alerts about the presence of the two main diseases that affect coffee plantation, coffee rust and American leaf spot, based on the current weather conditions. The role of the private sector toward the goals about sustainable development in Costa Rica is determinant. Through several initiatives, the private sector and government institutions are working together to promote technology changes and synergies among producers and consumers for the sustainability in agri-food systems. Two of the ongoing initiatives I would like to mention in detail are Ecological Blue Flag Program and National Plan on Sustainable and Healthy Gastronomy. Ecological Blue Flag is a multi-stakeholder initiative led by the National Public-Private Committee to foster good agricultural practice in water resources, soil management, agrochemical use, organic residues, animal care, adaptation, and mitigation. The participant should apply a voluntary standard provided by the program. The process is renewable every year. Those participants who get 90% of the score receive an award which can be used in the marketing of the products. This program is encouraging the small farmers to participate actively due to the award is an added value for the production. The National Plan of Sustainable and Healthy Gastronomy promotes enable conditions for organic and sustainable farming through several initiatives to contribute to national goals of competitiveness and low carbon development. The plan is a public-private initiative that simultaneously combines the strengthening of gastronomy as value in the national tourism proposal with the objectives of sustainable food production, biodiversity conservation, and environmental protection. The goals of the plan are aimed to stimulate sustainable production, the rescue of traditions, and the renewal of the gastronomy of the country, linking various sectors of national development in sustainable agriculture production, food security, health and nutrition, culture, sustainable management of biodiversity, tourism, and gastronomy.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So I will follow up on the great presentation by Roberto. More or less simultaneous to the case study that we did in Costa Rica, also the World Bank had asked CIAT and CATIE to look more specifically at the number of practices applied by farmers in the main subsectors or the crops for Costa Rica. And the idea was to look for evidence that practices were climate smart, in order to be able to promote evidence-based investments in climate smart agriculture practices. The result of that study is shown here. Is shown here, where you can see the main crop systems that were studied was pineapple, banana, coffee, cattle, and then a mix of other agriculture crops. Basically, like Roberto already mentioned, many of the agriculture systems here are mixed systems. In each of those, and talking to experts in a number of workshops, we identified practices that were considered to be good practices, and then we looked at each of those practices in terms of carbon smartness, how would they contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, water smartness, efficient use of water mainly, but also drainage, weather smartness, whether they were using weather information in order to improve their production systems, then nitrogen smartness, particularly related to fertilizers and other agrochemicals, energy smartness in terms of efficient energy use, and whether systems were actually using up-to-date knowledge in order to also improve their systems. You can see that the height of the bars is in terms of smartness, on a range of 0 to 5, and here only the smarter practices have been indicated in this particular figure. You can see there's a number of quite smart practices, but we shouldn't get really confused and say, okay, then we should apply those, because in some of the practices actually, if you apply them, they will increase the smartness of the system, and you can then complement them with other smart practices, as we'll see in a moment. What we also can see here is the colors, where blue color indicates the high degree of adoption of the practices. For example, in banana, the banana companies here, they have a dedicated climate information services, and most farmers are actually using that. In the same way, all agriculture farms, well, not the farms themselves, but the processing facilities already are using improved water management systems. But on the other hand, things like organic fertilizers in cattle, seems to be very climate smart, but as you can see in the color of it, there's a very low adoption rate. So that is actually a practice which has a great scope to improve cattle farming in Costa Rica. And the same thing you can say for efficient use of agrochemicals. Yeah, and I heard this morning on the radio that Costa Rica is one of the countries with the highest rates of use of agrochemicals per hectare. And so there's a great scope for improvement. There are already good practices in Costa Rica, yeah, but there's a very low adoption rate. But if we look then at some practices in particular, yeah, this is an example, yeah, where in pineapple, where two practices are being evaluated, and then you can see the triangles indicating, yeah, a bigger triangle means high smartness. And you can see that these two practices in pineapple, yeah, they are quite climate smart, or quite smart in, for example, the carbon footprint and energy use, if you look at efficient use of machinery, and in terms of weather information in the case of erosion prevention in drainage. Draining ditches, yeah, and they also improve the nitrogen use. Yeah. Each of them is not very smart, but you can see if you combine them, you get actually a circle, yeah, which is quite full with smartness. Yeah. So this is a good example of where the selection of particular measures, yeah, a proper selection can actually give you a much smarter system, yeah, than just applying one of those. Yeah, in the case of coffee, yeah, looking at, for example, the greater energy efficiency, the carbon capture of coffee forestry systems, there's a medium adoption rate. You can see that it is quite smart, but it requires greater energy efficiency, but also greater adoption rates. Yeah, and so this is really in support also of the Coffee Nama in Costa Rica. Yeah, this shows that there's a great scope. Yeah, the practices already exist. Yeah, but what we need to do is really implement those practices in many more farms. And then in the case of a mix of agriculture practices, yeah, you can see there's an efficient use of agrochemicals and integrated irrigation and drainage systems. Yeah, both are quite smart. Yeah, and again, they are complementary. Yeah, they particularly in the case of water efficiency, yeah, they're complementary and they should be used both, but they have low adoption rates. Yeah, and finally, in the what I mentioned already, in the banana, the dedicated climate information service, yeah, it's currently only applied in banana, but really has a great scope for other production systems as well. And we just heard that also coffee just recently started applying a similar system. Yeah, and we have already had requests not only from Costa Rica but other countries as well. Yeah, looking for really climate information services. Yeah, which is not just looking at providing information on the climate, but also what the implications of that information is for management of particular crops. Yeah, so the big question is not so much, well, what are climate smart practices? We know a lot about that already, and a lot of them are being applied, but they're only applied in relatively few farms. Yeah, so really the big question is, how can we increase the adoption rates? And one of them would be to increase the demand for climate responsible products. Yeah, certification schemes could be one form. Yeah, but also, for example, in countries like Costa Rica, internal, yeah, a lot of consumers will not go for certification schemes because they raise the price of the products. Yeah, so much more needs to be done at the consumer level, not just at the production level. Yeah, also. In spite of many years, like at least 2 decades already, of promoting sustainable agriculture practice in Costa Rica, we see that there's still the adoption rate of most practices are still relatively low. Yeah, so we probably need to revise the extension services. Yeah, not necessarily make them bigger, but we may need to change how they actually reach the farmers. Yeah, because there's few agents and they need to reach many more farmers than they do at the moment. Yeah. In addition, yeah, some of our studies have indicated that farmers would be willing to change their systems, yeah, but they have some barriers. Yeah, and those barriers may be related to the normative framework in Costa Rica and in many other countries as well. Yeah, but they also may be related to actually access to extension services, access to financial services, access to climate services as well. Yeah, so we also need tailor-made technical, climate, and financial services. At the regional scale, for example, the previously mentioned IICA, the Integrated Central American, the System for Integration in Central America, yeah, they through their regional hydrological resource committee, they're already working on a publicly available climate service or climate information service, which should link climate information which comes from all the meteorological institutes of the region, yeah, and link that to actual management recommendations. Yeah, this is just a recent initiative. It's still under construction, yeah, but it's very promising in the future. Yeah, and then yeah, I mentioned already it's very important to work at the consumer level, not just at the production level. Yeah, and probably the best way to do that is start already in the schools, yeah, in education and awareness programs, yeah, particularly in relation to the use of the agrochemicals. Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding about agrochemicals. There's a lot of overuse of agrochemicals just to make sure that, yeah, many farmers are afraid that they might not be putting enough, yeah, or they're putting it at the wrong time, so they lose a lot of the chemicals into the groundwater. It washes away, yeah, or it is, yeah, basically washes away. Yeah, efficient use of water and energy as well. Yeah, water in Costa Rica always has been plentiful. There's a lot of rain in some of the areas, yeah, but that water is not always available. Yeah, and a lot of water is contaminated as well, both for natural contamination, like we have at the moment this volcano throwing ashes in a number of water sources at the moment. Yeah, but also, yeah, and much more important, contamination in the urban areas, but also in the agriculture zones. Yeah, and then of course the potential of appropriate use of climate information. Yeah, it's not necessary, not just that the climate information is not available, but also a lot of people don't really know how to use, yeah, this climate information, how it could actually improve their production systems. So these are just a number of challenges, but at the same time also creating a lot of opportunities for improving climate smart agriculture in Costa Rica. And I think the proposals at the moment, or the implementation already of the coffee and the cattle NAMAs in Costa Rica are going to be a big step in the right direction, particularly because even though they are mitigation oriented, yeah, as you could see in the previous slides, they also have a big scope to improve the adaptation capacity of the farmers. Yeah, so really an integrated approach towards the climate smart agriculture. So that is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. And we also like to thank Manuel Jimenez of the CAC, yeah, Claudia Buronkle-Paulenbach and Claudia Medellin of CATIE, members of the Climate Change Technical Group from the Ministry of Agriculture who contribute to the Costa Rica case study, farmer organization members who also contributed to the Costa Rica case study on climate smart agriculture, the GACSA facilitation unit, and the World Bank. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much to all of you, to all of our presenters for a great presentation. So we have several questions, but before we go into questions, I just wanted to say that I've had a few participants who have been having audio issues, and we usually, we've been doing this for the last 3 years, so we have monthly webinars. We usually don't have this many participants who are having an issue, but we will definitely look into what caused it, and we will make sure that you'll get the recording. So I apologize for all the audio difficulties that you may have been having during this webinar. So we don't have a lot of time left for questions, but we do have some questions, and we'll start going through them as and see how far we can get before we end. So the first question is, so you spoke about the importance of a regional approach, articulation at different levels, South-South cooperation. do you see the potential for a regional approach to climate-smart agriculture through the IICA platform, for example? So I guess whoever feels it's more appropriate, is more relevant to respond to, go ahead.
So my answer would be yes. I mean, I think that was the point, that they actually are doing things at the regional level that then, you know, provide political will, additional technical information, kind of a coordination on regional climate smart ag priorities that, you know, these are all small countries in Central America with obviously a limited amount of resources. And so then by identifying climate smart ag challenges at the regional level and trying to address them through this group, exchanging information on what works and what hasn't worked, is certainly facilitating, you know, the planning for and implementation of climate smart agriculture at the national level as well. I don't know if Roberto or Bas, you have another opinion.
Yeah, I think it is important for Costa Rica also to cooperate and to share experiences with other countries in Central America, because all of us are in the same climate condition. Some of the countries in the north, droughts are very severe, more than Costa Rica, and I think it is important to be to share experiences, especially in terms of water use technologies. And yeah, I think we have to take advantage of this organization in Central America in order to share experiences.
Great. Thank you both. So the next question is from Martin Falling. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing the names correctly. So it is a question about the criteria that has been used to identify climate smart initiatives. So it says, in identifying climate smart agriculture initiatives in Costa Rica, what kind of criteria have been used to identify these initiatives, both in terms of the approach, whether it's only or partly public policies and also private initiatives, and also in terms of the content? When was the initiative identified as climate smart?
Two sides to this question, and I'll answer the first one, and then I'll ask Roberto to go for the second one. From the CATIE point of view, and in the study for the World Bank, yeah, we started in a general discussion with experts, yeah, talking about three main pillars, yeah, adaptation, mitigation, and production. Yeah, and then the experts said, okay, these practices, yeah, we think are good in these three areas. Yeah. And then the following step was, yeah, if we can go, well, we're back on slide 26 already. Yeah, the following step was then to look at carbon smartness, water smartness, weather smartness, nitrogen, energy, and knowledge smartness. Yeah, then each of them had a number of questions to see, okay, whether basically related to whether they apply, yeah, are they efficiently used or not. So of course, there's a next step would be to also look at to actually measure that smartness. Yeah, but that would be a long-term research effort, and some of that in the, for example, the coffee and cacao sector is already being done, not in Costa Rica, but in other countries in Central America. So we're advancing in that, in the measurements. It's actually coming to metrics for climate smart agriculture. Of course, what you can see here is not specifically indicated also the productivity of the activities. Yeah, but they were also taken into account. Yeah, when you talk about efficient use of agrochemicals, for example, is the relation of the use of agrochemicals to the production rates of the crops. Yeah, Roberto, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
No, it's okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Bastiaan. So the next question is about adoption rate. and it comes from George Fury. So he's asking how to increase adoption rates. Can you highlight the key barriers to the adoption of the CSA practices in your country?
One of the extension techniques we are using in Costa Rica to promote the adoption is with some farmers, leader farmers, and we start to apply a new technology and to have data about how the technology functions in terms of not only technical issues but also, and very important, in terms of the profitability of the practice. It's clear that the farmers are going to adopt those practices who are more profitable. So it is important to put attention to the economic side of the technologies, not only the environmental side, because of course economic side is the most important in most of the cases of farmers. So it is important to have like school farms where farmers interact and discuss about how the practice function and what are the results in terms of economic side.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to add to that as well that it's very important also to look at the production system in the context of the whole value chain. In the past, in the 80s, for example, a lot of new crops were introduced in Costa Rica with the idea that, okay, there would be a market. But in the end, the market was there, but the assistance was only to the producer, and it was not inserting the producer also in the value chain. So I think that also is important in being able to improve adoption rates.
Great, thank you. So I've actually received what sounds more like a comment. It says, in the case of technique adoption, we recommend to do a sensitivity analysis. So I'm not sure if that's something that you have to add anything to, or we can move to the next question if you like. Hello? Roberto, Kelly, should I read the next question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the next question is again about the criteria. I think you would probably have touched a little bit on this. So it says, what criteria were used to prioritize climate smart agriculture practices for each production system?
Bastiaan, then. I think that if you look still at the graph that is on there now, the criteria are then those 6 types of smartness, of course the productivity as well, but also the complementarity of the practices, and the ease of adoption. So if we see that for example, in the case of efficient use of agrochemicals, it has a relatively high smartness rate, so that would be normally an interesting one to promote. In addition, you see there's a very small adoption rate. So really, before starting to promote it, we would need to see why is a low adoption rate. And then in agrochemicals in particular, one of the things that happened in the past is that because of the limited extension services, there's relatively few agents per 1,000 farmers. So then we see a lot of companies selling agrochemicals, promoting their agrochemicals, and they're taking the role of extension services, which has had also as an effect a greater use of agrochemicals. Good for the companies, but not so good for climate smart agriculture. So then we would need to look at whether we can actually do something about it. So it's not just looking at the technical aspects, which was done here, but also we need to do a more in-depth analysis of why adoption rates of some of those practices are really low.
Great. Thank you, Bastiaan. So the next question is actually something that you mentioned before. And I'm aware that we're almost at the end of the session, so we will make this the last question. So it says the question is from Peter Schlesinger, and Peter is asking regarding the adoption. Bastiaan mentioned bringing CSA education into schools. Are there programs to educate science teachers of high schools to bring attention to these technologies in their classrooms?
Okay, hi Peter. Well, of course, I'm not an education specialist, and so it's difficult to say that specifically. I know there are schools, that actually take up agriculture in their curriculum. Yeah, they have their small home gardens. Yeah, and Costa Rica also, I think one of the great things in the education system has been that they included environmental education system. So that would be one part where they would actually be able to take up these issues.
Great. Thank you so much to all of the speakers, Kelly, Roberto, and Bastiaan. Thank you very much for taking the time to share these lessons from the case study. We have come to the end of the session, and I just want to ask everyone if you could take just a couple of seconds to answer the survey that is appearing on the right-hand side of the screen. That would be really great, because that's one way that we get feedback about these sessions and then make improvements in the future. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining us, and I would like to invite you to register for our upcoming webinar with the country case study of France. The webinar is scheduled for next Tuesday on June 2nd. And you can register via the GACSA website. I'm just posting the link as I'm speaking right now on the chat box for everyone to see. So please feel free to register. And then I'll hope I'll see you next week as well. We will post the recording and the presentation on the GACSA website, and our colleagues will send an email out to let you know, to everyone who has registered and attended today, to let you know when they are available on the website. So once again, thank you, and look forward to seeing you next week.